Okay, on your last day of class, we're going to talk about the quadratic formula. All right, and this is going to help you out for next year when you take geometry or whatever class you're going to take next year. You can't get away from this formula. It looks like a lot, but really it's not hard to remember. I got a little tune that'll actually help you to remember. Um, but if you don't remember anything about factoring or trinomials, just know that when in doubt, you can use the quadratic formula to solve for it. And once you remember the formula, it's very simple. All right. So when we can't figure out a factor trinomial, we always have a fallback plan. This will always work for a trinomial. We use a quadratic formula to solve, and it works every single time. All right. So for a trinomial, I have an ax squared plus bx plus c. This is just a trinomial. A, b, and c are just numbers. They can be any number you want. All right. Any number you want. They're just numbers. All right. So we're giving you a general case. We can use this formula to solve for x, where negative b is the number right in front of the x, including the sign, is the number right in front of the x. And a is a number right in front of the x squared, including the sign in front of it. And c is a constant that doesn't have an x by it. It's called a constant, by the way, where it doesn't have an x by it, including the sign. I should have circled the sign there as well. Okay? So all we got to do is we plug that into a formula. Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all divided by 2a. We plug it into that formula, and it gives us our solution to our problem. Here's my little tune to help you remember this. You can sing it if you want to, but it's Pop Goes a Weasel. It helps me remember what it is to the tune of Pop Goes a Weasel. It goes negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay? If that helps you remember the quadratic formula, more power to you. It helps me remember it, so I thought I'd share it with you. So that's how I remember that. And I'm going to show you how it works here in just a second. Okay, so it says factor, and then use a quadratic formula to verify the quadratic formula works. Now, you can take my word for it, but I can show you what it does. All right? So we know how to factor this. We know how to factor. All right? Actually, I should have an equal 0. Let's solve for x like we've been doing. All right? Let's factor. We know they're both going to have an x's. This sign tells me the sign's going to be the same. This sign tells me they're both positive, right? Okay, I need two numbers that multiply to be 8, add up to be 6. I know those two numbers are 2 and 4. All right, and that equals 0. Okay, and when we solve that, remember we set both these equations equal to 0, so x plus 2 equals 0 and x plus 4 equals 0. All right, so x equals negative 2 and x equals negative 4. All right. So we know that's true. We know how to factor. Let me show you how to do the quadratic. All right, the quadratic formula. We said that x is going to be negative 2 and x is going to be 4. X equals negative 2 and x equals negative 4. All right, we're going to get that same answer here when we do the quadratic equation. All right, so our formula says negative b. So what that means is the opposite sign. So if this was a minus sign, we'd have a positive 6. But it's a plus sign, so we're going to have a negative 6. So it says negative b. So negative 6 plus or minus the square root of b squared, and b was our 6, so b squared, minus 4 times a. A was what's right in front of the x. If there's nothing there, we know that's a 1 because, you know, we're efficient as math people. We're going to, if we don't have to write a 1, we won't write it. So a is 1, and then c is our constant, including the sign there, so positive 8. Okay? All over 2a, which is 1. Okay, now. Orders of operation says we need to figure out everything inside here before we add or subtract and then divide. All right, so we're going to figure out everything inside the radical sign. So we know that 6 squared is 36 minus 4 times 1 is 4 times 8 is 32. So we have negative 6 plus or minus the square root of 36 minus 32 all over 2, because 2 times 1 is 2. All right, so again, let's just simplify what's inside here. We know this is 4, so it's going to be negative 6 plus or minus the square root of 4 divided by 2. We know the square root of 4 is 2, so we know negative 6 plus or minus 2 divided by 2. Now that plus or minus sign, we've evaluated some stuff like that. You know that we're just going to have two answers. All right, we're going to take negative 6, we're going to add 2. Then we're going to take negative 6 and subtract 2. So we need to do two things for this. So we have negative 6. I'll go over here. I ran out of room. Negative 6 plus 2 divided by 2, and we're going to need negative 6 minus 2 divided by 2. All right, well, negative 6 plus 2 is a negative 4, divided by 2 is a negative 2. So that one equals negative 2. Negative 6 minus 2, so cross the line and change the sign, is going to be negative 8. Negative 8 divided by 2 is a negative 4. Isn't that the same thing that we just got up here? Whoops, drew my arrows the wrong ones. All right, but the same thing we got up above. Our answers we got up above. This will always work. And right now, yeah, maybe that seems like more work than just factoring it. But let me give you an example down here. How would you solve that one? How would you factor 3x squared plus 2x minus 7? We don't know how to right now. There is a way. All right. There's different methods of factoring that we couldn't get to this year. But we don't need to know them because we know how to do the quadratic formula. So we said, all right, our A is 3, our B is 2, and our C is negative 7 because we include our signs. Okay? A comes before the x squared, B comes before the x, and C is the one that doesn't have an x connected to it. So we know our formula is negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. All right, so we know that, right? That's a b, by the way. All right, so we're going to say, okay, negative b. So opposite of b is negative 2 plus or minus the square root of b squared, which is 2 squared, minus 4a, which is 3, and c, which is negative 7, all over 2 times a. Okay. Oh, we can do this. All right, so I have, remember we had to work everything out inside here. So 4 squared, or 2 squared was 4, so I have negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 4 minus, let's see, 4 times 3 is 12. 12 times 7 is what, 72? Is that right? 4 times 12 is, or 12 times 7, 12 times 6 would be 72. 12 times 7 would be 84, right? Hold on a second, I'll make sure I'm right. Yeah, 12 times 7 is 84. Sorry, I had a little bit of brain fart there. All right, so 12 times 7 is 84, but we have a negative times a negative, so it's plus 84. All right, divided by 2 times 3, which is 6. All right, so we go ahead and we continue to simplify inside. So plus or minus negative, plus negative 2 plus or minus square root of 88 divided by 6. Now, we're not going to get a nice number, and that's okay. We don't need to have a nice number. All right, we can still get our two answers. We can go negative 2 plus the square root of 88 divided by 6, and we're going to go negative 2 minus the square root of 88 divided by 6, and we'll get our two answers. They might be decimals, and that's fine. So we'll say negative 2 plus the square root of 88, and then we're going to divide by 6, and I'll get 1.23. Now on our calculator, I highly suggest that you go through the calculator right now and make sure you're getting the same answer I am. I would type in the top first, hit enter, then divide by 6. If you don't do that, if you type it all at one point, you got to put parentheses around the top, okay? Otherwise it will come out wrong. So then for the other one, it'd be negative 2 minus the square root of 88 divided by 6, and I get a negative 1.897, something around that range, okay? So that's all you need to do. So using the quadratic formula for that. All right. One more problem. Oh, by the way, two more problems. Okay, two more problems. They say find the roots of negative 6 equals negative x squared plus x. The roots means find where x equals 0. Roots, actually, when you get up to more graphing, roots means where the graph crosses the x-axis. All right, so we want to figure out when x equals 0. That's what they're asking. So figure out when x equals 0. So we add our x over, so we have, or add our 6 over, so we have negative x squared plus x plus 6. Okay, we can do our quadratic formula. Remember, what we have been doing was we've been making sure that our x is always positive, so we can multiply through by a negative. So we have 0 equals x squared minus x minus 6. We can still do that. That's fine. We can try to factor it, right? If we factor it, can we figure out two things that multiply to be 6 and add up to be a negative 1? Well, I think we can. So x plus, the sign tells us they're different. This time the sign tells us they're the same. All right. we know that 2 times 3 is 6. So if I have a negative 3 and a positive 2, those add up to be negative 1. We can still do everything that we have been doing. The only time we have to do the quadratic formula is when, all right, is when we can't figure out how to factor it. We can always have a fallback plan. All right, so we know that x equals the roots of this equation will be x equaling negative 2, and x equal to 3. How do I do that? I set these equal to 0. All right, so that shouldn't be too hard. Okay, so you can use either, I could use the quadratic formula there as well. All right, so I'm not going to do this last example. We're running out of time here for YouTube. Your homework has been emailed to you. It's on the same page as your notes. There's your homework. Feel free to watch this as many times as you want. Feel free to go back and watch more of the quadratic equation, or look it up on YouTube. Have a good day today. We'll see you later.